Deep in the wild heart of Pinegrove's forest, where shadows dance under towering pines, a chilling discovery stopped a young bobcat cub named Blake in his tracks. He wasn't expecting to stumble upon a heartbreaking scene. A tiny German shepherd puppy, Luna, tangled in thorny vines, her whimpers barely audible. Abandoned after a campout, she was alone, injured and scared, a helpless animal left to fade away. Blake, barely more than a cub himself, froze. His instinct screamed to move on, but something in Luna's trembling eyes sparked a flicker of compassion. This wasn't just another day in the wilderness. It was the start of an unforgettable story. With cautious paws, Blake edged closer, his heart pounding as he nudged the vines, determined to free her. Every rustle of the forest seemed to whisper danger, yet he stayed. What would a wild bobcat risk for a stranger, and what lay ahead for these two unlikely souls? Their journey was just beginning, and the wilderness held secrets that would test them both. The forest around Pinegrove was no place for a scared puppy like Luna, her fur matted with dirt and her paws scraped raw from thorny vines. Blake, the young bobcat cub, had just freed her. But now they faced a bigger challenge, getting her to safety. The wilderness stretched out like an endless maze, its towering trees casting long, eerie shadows as the sun dipped low. Blake's golden eyes scanned the underbrush, his ears twitching at every snap of a twig. He wasn't built for this kind of rescue mission, but something about Luna's trusting gaze kept him moving forward. This little German shepherd, barely clinging to life, was counting on him, and that stirred something deep in the wild animal's heart. Their journey began with cautious steps. Luna limped behind Blake, her small body trembling from exhaustion. The forest floor was a minefield of roots and rocks, and every few steps she'd stumble, letting out a soft whine. Blake slowed his pace, glancing back to make sure she was still there. He wasn't used to company. Solitude was all he'd ever known, but Luna's presence felt like the start of a story neither of them could have predicted. Hunger gnawed at them both. Blake sniffed out a few berries and nudged them toward Luna, who lapped them up gratefully. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her going. Dehydration was another enemy. The nearest stream was a distant trickle, and Blake's instincts guided them toward it. He lapped at the cool water, then watched as Luna drank, her tail giving a weak wag for the first time. The deeper they went, the more treacherous the path became. A steep ravine forced Blake to scout ahead, his agile paws navigating the rocky edges while Luna waited, her eyes locked on him. He found a narrow path and coaxed her across, staying close as she wobbled. At one point, a distant howl echoed through the trees. Coyotes, maybe, or something worse. Blake's fur bristled, but he pressed his body against Luna's, urging her to keep moving. He didn't know Pinegrove's edge, but he'd heard of the place where humans lived, where lights glowed at night and safety might be found. That was his goal, though doubt crept in with every step. Could a wild animal like him really pull this off? Night fell, and the forest grew colder. Luna's breaths came in shallow puffs, and Blake curled up beside her when they rested, sharing his warmth. It was strange, this connection with a creature so different from him. He'd always fended for himself, but now he felt a weight, a responsibility he couldn't shake. The stars above offered no answers, only a reminder of how far they still had to go. By dawn, they were moving again, fueled by stubborn hope. The forest began to thin, and faint sounds of human life, distant voices, a car's hum reached Blake's ears. They were close, but Luna's strength was fading fast. Would they make it to the edge of town before it was too late? And what would they find there? The edge of Pinegrove shimmered into view as Blake and Luna stumbled out of the forest's grip, the morning sun casting a soft glow over the dew-kissed grass. Luna's legs wobbled, her small body pushed to its limit after their grueling trek. Blake, the young bobcat cub, stayed close, his sharp eyes darting between the puppy and the unfamiliar world ahead. The wild animal in him screamed to turn back to the safety of the trees, but Luna's faint whimpers kept him rooted. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was a story of something deeper, something that tugged at his instincts in ways he couldn't explain. They reached a quiet street where quaint houses lined the road, their porches adorned with flower baskets. Luna's strength gave out, and she collapsed in the soft earth of a backyard garden, her breaths shallow and ragged. Blake froze, crouching low in the shadows of a rosebush, his heart pounding. The garden belonged to Margaret, an elderly widow with silver hair and a gentle smile, who was tending to her flowers in the early light. She hummed softly, her hands brushing over petals, until her eyes caught Luna's crumpled form. "Oh my goodness," she gasped, dropping her trowel. Without hesitation, she knelt beside the puppy, her fingers gently checking for injuries. Luna's tail gave a weak twitch, and Margaret's heart melted at the sight of the frightened animal. Margaret scooped Luna up, cradling her like a child, and hurried inside her cozy home. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread, and she laid Luna on a soft blanket, fetching water and a bit of leftover chicken. "You poor thing," she murmured, dabbing at Luna's cuts with a warm cloth. The puppy lapped up the water, her eyes flickering with a spark of hope. Margaret's years of caring for strays had honed her instincts for rescue, but this felt different, a story she'd tell for years. She worked quickly, cleaning Luna's wounds and wrapping her in warmth, her hands steady but her mind racing with questions about how this puppy ended up here. Outside, Blake watched from the garden, his sleek form blending with the foliage. He hadn't left, though every instinct urged him to flee. Luna was safe now, but something kept him there, hidden among the flowers. Margaret noticed him, her eyes catching the glint of his amber gaze. She didn't startle or shoo him away. Instead, she stepped outside and placed a small bowl of milk near the garden's edge, her movements slow and deliberate. "You brought her here, didn't you?" she said softly, as if speaking to a friend. Blake didn't move, but his ears twitched, taking in her voice. The milk sat untouched for now, but Margaret's kindness lingered in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of the bobcat's role in this unlikely rescue. As the day wore on, Margaret kept checking on Luna, who slept soundly inside. Blake stayed in the garden, his eyes never straying far from the house. The bond he'd formed with Luna, forged through their shared struggle, wasn't something he could easily walk away from. Margaret, too, seemed to sense the weight of their journey. She glanced out her window, wondering about the wild creature who'd risked so much. What would become of this fragile puppy and the bobcat who'd led her to safety? And how would their paths intertwine now that they'd reached this new haven? The soft glow of morning light filtered through Margaret's kitchen window, casting a warm halo over Luna, who lay curled up on a plush blanket. The German shepherd puppy, once a trembling bundle of fur, was starting to look like herself again. Margaret's gentle care, warm meals, clean bandages, and soft words had worked wonders. Luna's cuts were healing, and her eyes sparkled with a new energy, her tail thumping softly against the floor as she nibbled on a piece of chicken. The old widow smiled, her heart swelling at the sight of this little animal bouncing back from the brink. It was a rescue story that felt like a small miracle, one she'd already started sharing with her neighbors over morning tea. Outside, in the garden, Blake was a quiet shadow among the roses. The young bobcat cub hadn't left since bringing Luna to safety. His wild instincts told him to bolt back to the forest, but something stronger kept him rooted. Each day, he'd creep closer to the house, his amber eyes fixed on the window where Luna slept. Margaret noticed, her keen eyes catching his sleek form as she watered her flowers. She'd set out a bowl of milk every morning, and though Blake was slow to trust, he'd started lapping at it when she wasn't looking. "You're a brave one," she'd whisper, not expecting an answer, but feeling a connection to the wild creature who'd changed Luna's fate. Luna's recovery brought a new rhythm to the garden. By the third day, she was strong enough to toddle outside, her paws sinking into the soft earth as she explored. She'd yip playfully, chasing a butterfly or nosing at a fallen leaf. Blake watched from a distance, his ears twitching with curiosity. At first, he'd stiffen when Luna got too close, her boundless energy a stark contrast to his cautious nature. But one afternoon, Luna bounded over, dropping a soggy stick at his paws, as if inviting him to play. Blake froze, his tail flicking, but he didn't run. Instead, he nudged the stick back, a small gesture that felt like the start of something new. Margaret, watching from her porch, chuckled softly. "Look at that," she said to herself, "a wild animal and a puppy, thick as thieves." The bond growing between Blake and Luna was unlike anything Margaret had seen. They'd been through so much: hunger, danger, and that long trek through the forest. It had forged a trust that didn't need words. Luna would nap in the garden, and Blake would settle nearby, his eyes half closed but always watchful. Margaret began to trust Blake too, leaving bits of food out and speaking to him in her gentle sing-song voice. He never came too close, but his presence was steady, a quiet promise that he wasn't ready to leave Luna behind. The garden became their meeting place, a patch of earth where a wild bobcat and a rescued puppy could exist side by side. As the days passed, Margaret found herself caught up in their story, her heart warmed by the unlikely friendship. She'd sit on her porch sipping tea and wonder what had drawn these two together. Luna's playful barks and Blake's silent vigil filled the air with a kind of magic. But change was coming. Margaret could sense it, like a shift in the wind. What would happen to this fragile bond when the world beyond the garden called? And who else might step into their story? The garden behind Margaret's house had become a little sanctuary, buzzing with the quiet rhythm of Luna's playful yips and Blake's watchful presence. The German shepherd puppy was now a bundle of energy, her fur gleaming under the sun as she bounded after butterflies or tumbled in the grass. Margaret watched from her porch, her heart full, marveling at how far this little animal had come since that desperate day she collapsed in her garden. Blake, the young bobcat cub, lingered in the shadows of the rose bushes, his amber eyes softer now, less wary. Their bond, forged through a harrowing rescue, had turned into something beautiful, a story Margaret couldn't stop thinking about as she sipped her tea. But change was in the air, as subtle as the autumn breeze rustling the leaves. One crisp morning, a pickup truck rumbled into Margaret's driveway, kicking up dust. It was her grandson, Ethan, a kind-hearted young man with a farm just outside Pinegrove. He stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel, and his eyes lit up when he saw Luna chasing her tail near the flower beds. "Grandma, who's this little firecracker?" he laughed, crouching to scratch Luna's ears. The puppy leapt into his arms, licking his face with unbridled joy. Margaret smiled, recounting the incredible story of Luna's arrival and the wild bobcat who'd brought her to safety. Ethan listened, his jaw dropping as he glanced toward the garden where Blake's silhouette flickered among the shrubs. "That's unreal," he said, shaking his head. "This pup's got a guardian angel." Ethan's farm, with its wide fields and friendly animals, seemed like the perfect place for Luna. After a long talk with Margaret, he agreed to take her home. "She'll have room to run, and I'll take good care of her," he promised, his voice warm with conviction. Margaret nodded, her eyes misty but proud. Luna deserved a home where she could thrive, but the thought of her leaving tugged at her heart. And what about Blake? The bobcat cub had become a fixture in the garden, his quiet presence a reminder of the unlikely bond that had saved Luna's life. Margaret wondered how he'd handle the goodbye. The moment came too soon. Ethan knelt beside Luna, clipping a leash to her new collar, while Blake watched from the edge of the garden. Luna, sensing something was different, trotted over to the bobcat, her tail wagging as she nudged his side playfully. Blake didn't move, but his eyes locked with hers, steady and intense. No barks, no growls, just a silent exchange that carried the weight of their shared journey. Margaret stood by, her hands clasped, feeling the ache of their parting. Ethan lifted Luna into his truck, and as the engine roared to life, Blake took a single step forward, his ears twitching. Then he stopped, as if understanding this was the end of their chapter. As the truck pulled away, Blake turned and slipped into the forest, his form blending with the trees. Margaret watched him go, a lump in her throat. The bobcat wasn't the same wild animal he'd been before Luna. Something had shifted in him. Kindness, connection, maybe even loss. The forest was his home, but would it ever feel the same after this? And what would linger in the hearts of those touched by this fleeting, beautiful story? This story of Blake and Luna isn't just about a bobcat and a puppy. It's a reminder of how connection can spark in the unlikeliest of places. A wild animal and an abandoned pup found each other in the wilderness, defying every instinct to forge a bond that saved a life. It makes you wonder what other unexpected friendships are out there, waiting to change the world in their own small way. Have you ever witnessed a moment of kindness that left you speechless, whether from an animal or a stranger? What does it mean to step up, to care, even when it's risky? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your stories. If this tale of courage and heart touched you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to catch more stories that'll make you laugh, cry, and believe in the power of connection. There's so much more to discover, and we can't wait to share it with you.